Picture a mother in the deep past, tens of thousands of years before hospitals, before medicine as we know it, before any of the safety nets we now take for granted. She is holding a newborn in a world that is doing everything in its power to take that child away. Disease, hunger, cold, predators, accidents, all of it pressing in on a fragile new life. And yet, here you are watching this, which means that across an unbroken chain, stretching back through the entire human story, enough of those children survived. The question of how ancient humans kept their children alive is not a small one. It is, in a very real sense, the question of how any of us came to exist at all. Today, we are going to look honestly at just how dangerous childhood once was, and at the remarkable strategies our ancestors used to protect the next generation. First, we have to face an uncomfortable truth, because the reality of ancient childhood was far harsher than most people imagine. Drawing on studies of both archaeological remains and modern hunter-gatherer societies, researchers have reached a sobering and surprisingly consistent estimate. On average, roughly a quarter of all infants did not survive their first year of life, and somewhere close to half of all children did not live to reach puberty. Let that sink in. In the world our ancestors built their lives around, a parent could realistically expect that around 1 in every 2 children they brought into the world would not grow up. This was not the experience of one unlucky group. Study after study, across very different times and places, points to almost the same grim numbers, which tells us this was simply the baseline condition of human life for most of our history. This single fact reshapes how we should understand the past. There is a common myth that ancient people all died young, that nobody lived past their 20s or 30s, but that is a misreading of the numbers. The reason the average lifespan looks so low is precisely because so many children died. When you average in all those infant and child deaths, the overall figure drops dramatically. But if you survived the gauntlet of childhood, if you made it past those deadly early years, your prospects changed completely. Studies of modern hunter-gatherers show that people who reached puberty often went on to live into their 60s and even 70s. Human mortality followed what scientists call a U-shaped curve. It was extremely dangerous to be very young, much safer to be an adult, and dangerous again only in old age. So the great challenge was never simply living. The great challenge was surviving the beginning. So how did our ancestors fight back against those odds? The answer is not a single trick, but a whole web of strategies woven into the very structure of how humans live. And the first and most powerful of them is something deceptively simple. Humans raise children together. Unlike most animals, where a mother is largely on her own, human children are raised with the help of an entire community. Anthropologists call this cooperative breeding, and it may be one of the secrets of our success. Grandmothers, aunts, older siblings, and other members of the group all pitched in to feed, carry, watch, and protect the young. This shared effort meant that a child was never dependent on just 1 or 2 people. If a mother fell ill, or had to forage, or had another baby to care for, there were other hands ready to help. The famous idea that it takes a village to raise a child is not just a saying. For our ancestors, it was a survival strategy, and quite possibly a decisive one. The role of grandmothers in particular has drawn serious scientific attention in what is sometimes called the grandmother hypothesis. In most animals, females reproduce until close to the end of their lives. Humans are unusual in that women often live for many decades after they can no longer have children. Why would evolution favor that? One leading idea is that grandmothers earned their keep and more by helping to raise their grandchildren.
A healthy, experienced older woman who could gather food, share knowledge, and care for the young would dramatically improve the survival chances of her daughter's children. Those extra survivors carried her genes forward, which means the very existence of the long human post-reproductive lifespan may be tied to the life-saving value of grandmothers. The wisdom and the helping hands of the old may literally have kept the young alive. Then there was the matter of feeding, and here too human biology and behavior worked together. Prolonged breastfeeding gave infants not just nutrition, but also protection, passing along some of the mother's immune defenses during the most vulnerable months. Weaning was a delicate transition, and the evidence from ancient remains shows it was often a dangerous time, when a child moved from the safety of mother milk to the uncertain world of solid food. Many of the stress markers that scientists find in the bones and teeth of ancient children cluster right around this weaning age, a silent record of just how risky that step could be. Groups that managed this transition carefully, with soft, nourishing foods and continued care, gave their children a better chance of making it through.
Fire and shelter played their part as well. The control of fire, which our ancestors had mastered long before, meant warmth against the cold nights that could kill a small child, protection against the predators that hunted in the dark, and cooked food that was safer and easier for young bodies to digest. A secure camp with a fire at its center and watchful adults all around transformed the odds for the youngest members of the group. The same tools that helped adults survive a hostile world were, in the end, also a shield held over their children. And we should not overlook something that is harder to measure but unmistakably present, and that is love. It is easy to imagine that in a world where so many children died, people must have become numb to it, hardened against loss. The evidence says otherwise. Archaeologists have uncovered ancient child burials carried out with extraordinary care and tenderness, infants laid gently in the ground, sometimes with their limbs carefully arranged, sometimes with small objects or adornments placed beside them. These graves are thousands of years old, and yet they speak across the distance with heartbreaking clarity. They tell us that ancient parents grieved their children, that they did not treat these small lives as disposable, that love and loss were every bit as real then as they are now. That same fierce parental devotion is itself a survival force. Parents who cared deeply fought harder to keep their children alive. When you put all of this together, a picture emerges of childhood survival as a collective triumph wrung from a brutal world. No single parent could have done it alone. It took the mother and the father, the grandmother and the aunt, the older siblings and the wider group, all bound together in a shared project of protecting the young. It took fire and shelter and careful feeding. It took hard-won knowledge passed down about which foods were safe for a small child and which were dangerous, how to soothe a fever, how to recognize the early signs of serious illness, how to handle the delicate transition of weaning. This was not written down anywhere. It lived entirely in human memory and was passed from one generation to the next through teaching, imitation, and shared daily life. A young mother was not left to figure things out alone. She inherited the hard-won knowledge of all the mothers who had come before her, taught to her by the older women of the group. This living library of child-care wisdom, refined over countless generations, was one of the most powerful tools our ancestors had for keeping their children alive, and it could only exist because humans lived in close, knowledge-sharing communities that held on to what they learned. This is the deep truth behind your own existence. You are the end point of an astonishing relay race, a chain of children who survived against the odds, each one protected by a community that refused to let go.
Every one of your ancestors, all the way back, was once a fragile infant in a dangerous world, and every one of them was kept alive long enough to grow up and pass life onward. The survival of human children was never guaranteed and never easy. It was earned, generation after generation, through cooperation, sacrifice, knowledge, and love. So, when we ask how ancient humans kept their children alive, the answer is that they did it together, and they did it with a devotion that has not changed in all the thousands of years since. The village that raised those children is the reason any of us are here to wonder about them at all.